Hi, this is Knighton Tallarico. Today is October 10th, 2013. And the reason I'm doing this video right now is because we're about to move into another eclipse season. This is autumn eclipse season 2013. And as I've spoken to this YouTube audience before, we are moving into an Aquarian age. In my estimation, somewhere around 2020 is when we'll really feel like we've kind of crossed the threshold into this new Aquarian age. The end of 2020, like December, is kind of the doorway I see. And you know, it's hard to make any of these things like really exact and definite, but let's just say that's a doorway that'll open. You know, those of you that remember people talking about the Mayan calendar ending, everyone expected there to be this, like, you know, drums playing and people screaming and yelling, yay, we're in the new age. And things just don't happen that way. They happen more slowly than that. But I think on some level we're going to feel that we've actually entered that Aquarian age, or door's been opened in our consciousness and in our lives as we get into December of 2020. So every time there's a set of important planetary aspects, as there is now with the autumn eclipses coming up, that means that there's a spike in our consciousness expansion, in our transformational movement, and in our evolution, both personally and globally. Now, what's coming up with this autumn equinox is going to be especially important because it's going to begin about a 9-month time period of transformation and evolution for our human family. The reason I say 9 months is because following this autumn equinox, or autumn eclipses, excuse me, we are then going to have in the springtime another eclipse season. But most importantly is during that eclipse season, there's going to be a grand cross of cardinal planets that will be making an exact aspect to the United States sun from its natal chart of July 4th, 1776. And within that grand cross, Uranus and Pluto will be squaring each other again. And there'll be 2 eclipses in that same month, and this is April 2014 that we're speaking of. So the Uranus-Pluto square, which also is happening this autumn in November, is a real symbolic aspect for evolution and transformation. I've spoke about it before, but back in 1965 and 1966, Uranus and Pluto made a conjunction with one another. And that conjunction symbolically brought on the 60s and 70s revolution. Now Uranus and Pluto are making a square with one another from 2012 through 2015, or when the exact squares are. And that time period will also inaugurate a new period of rapid transformation and evolution for the human family. So this 9-month period starting now and going through into the summer of 2014, during a lot of that time, we are going to be going through a lot of personal transformation, and there'll be a lot of world events that'll put our world through a lot of transformation, and most specifically the United States, because remember again, that grand cross, cardinal cross, will be to the United States natal sun. And all those planets, which will be Uranus and Pluto and Jupiter and Mars making a grand cross, all of those planets will be exactly in aspect to one another, 13 degrees of those cardinal signs. Those cardinal signs being Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. So if you're a person who has planets in the middle of those signs, middle degrees of those signs, you also will be going through some big transformation, especially as we get into late winter and springtime of 2014. For now, we're moving into the autumn eclipses. And here are the dates that these will appear. There will be a lunar eclipse on October 18th. So, for all practical purposes, we're kind of in the eclipse season right now, because we had the new moon in Libra, and it kind of like touched it off. Like you just kind of feel the winds just beginning to blow in for the eclipse season. But the changes and the intensity will start increasing more and more as we get to that first eclipse on October 18th. And that one will be Sun in Libra, Moon in Aries. So all lunar eclipses are full moons. All solar eclipses are new moons. So this will be a full moon in Libra Aries. The moon will actually be in Aries. And since it's an eclipse, it'll be a full moon exponentially stronger, much stronger than the normal full moon. So let's say, and I'm just, throwing out a number, but, 10, 12 times stronger than a normal full moon. And I know a lot of you really feel it when a full moon comes around, so you're going to feel it even more with a lunar eclipse. Then, 3 days later after that lunar eclipse on October 18th, Mercury's going to go retrograde in Scorpio. And a lot of you know that Mercury retrograde during normal times kind of shifts our way of thinking, our way of communicating. Things start getting a little fuzzier. We move sometimes into what I like to think of as kind of a twilight zone in our thinking and in our consciousness. And during those times, sometimes it's not good to make major decisions, to sign contracts, because our minds, even though we may not know it sometimes, are not operating the same way that they usually operate. So we have to do a double take before we make any important decisions. We have to go inside ourselves, trust our intuition and our imagination more, and not rely so much on our left brain logical thinking, because that's the part that gets affected the most when Mercury goes retrograde. So it's good to go internal, though, during those times, and to reflect on things. So Mercury will be in retrograde and in Scorpio. So that means that since Scorpio kind of gets us into those emotions that are more intense, more passionate, more potentially volatile, with Mercury in Scorpio, those kind of emotions could be coming up through our thinking process. So 18th, lunar eclipse. 21st, Mercury goes retrograde. Not long after that, on November 1st, is another Uranus-Pluto square. And when that one happens, there's only going to be 2 more after that from this 2012-2015 time period of Uranus squaring Pluto. So on November 1st, Uranus square Pluto. And then on November 3rd, the most powerful of the eclipses, I believe, and that's going to be a solar eclipse in Scorpio on November 3rd. So it's total. Total usually has more power to it, more intensity to it. Now this one is also called a hybrid total solar eclipse. It's a hybrid because in some places it's going to be a partial eclipse, and in some places it's going to be a total eclipse. Where will it be seen? It will be seen very well on the east coast of the United States. Southern Europe should be able to see it pretty well. Anyone boating in the Atlantic Ocean is going to be able to see it. The Middle East will get a strong dose of it. And Africa will also, and especially mid-Africa, like right around the equator, because they'll get the total eclipse right going through there. So on the East Coast, which is where I am, we will be able to see that solar eclipse, and it'll be happening in its fullest between 7:30 and 8 p.m. But we probably will be able to see the beginning of it maybe like an hour before or something like that. The lunar eclipse that's before that on October 18th, we will also be able to see that one. Let me get my times better here. The lunar eclipse will be between 7:30 and 8 will be the fullest. And the solar eclipse is going to be in the morning at daybreak. is when we're going to see it, and around 7:30 is when it'll be at its fullest. That's the solar. Sorry to mix you up on that. The lunar, of course, because it's the moon, is going to be in the nighttime. But we will be able to see both of these eclipses. The lunar eclipse will not be full, so you won't see the total moon coverage, but the solar eclipse, we should see most of the sun covered. And remember, to be safe, don't look directly at that sun. You got to just look it up on the internet or in your newspaper, and you'll see ways that'll be more effective and safer for you to be looking at that sun as you go through that solar eclipse. So you can see that the lunar eclipse, Mercury retrograde, Uranus square Pluto, solar eclipse, all those coming back to back with one another, that we can expect an especially strong and intense eclipse season. And it'll last longer than usual, and I'll tell you why. Because at the end of November, comet Ison, I-S-O-N, will be appearing in our skies unless it disintegrates as it gets close to the sun. Perihelion, which is its time when it's closest to the sun, will be on November 28th. But you got to realize that because it's so close to the sun, days prior to that, it could break up and it won't be as powerful or as beautiful or as easily seen as some people are saying it will be. Comets are always like heralds of change on the Earth. So it happening so close to the eclipse season, if it does turn out to be as bright as they say, because the brighter we can see it usually means the more effect that it actually has also on our human condition. So you can see starting late October all through November. November 28th is the comet, which may be important. And then we have a new moon on December 2nd in Sagittarius. And then shortly after that, the eclipse season of the autumn should be coming to an end. So what does that mean in our personal lives and in the world? Well, I think we can compare the 60s, 70s revolution to now. Because remember with the Uranus-Pluto, I said the conjunction was 65, 66, and now the square. The first major meeting they've had since 65 and 66 is now. So remember back in the 60s and 70s, those of you that were around then, people were singing about the dawning of the age of Aquarius. And that's because of all the changes that were going on then, all the transformation to our human condition. We had civil rights movements for women, for equality between men and women. We had African American civil rights. We had a war that was unjust and unfair. And we had people waking up to the fact that our government was corrupt and couldn't be trusted. So you had Watergate, which brought down a president. You had Vietnam, which got people realizing that these wars are not always fair and just. You had civil rights movements, which awakened everyone to realize that our African American brothers and sisters and women in our culture were not treated with fairness in our world. So now with Uranus square Pluto again, and with another big shift in our evolution and revolution on our planet for the human condition, you can see some things that are happening again. So for instance, our gay brothers and sisters are now getting more rights. We're also finding out that wars again are being perpetrated that have been unjust, like the war in Iraq, for instance, and what happened in Libya, and what they almost did in Syria. If it wasn't for the people speaking up through polls, that one would have happened too. When you take a look at NSA and its spying on the human family, you can see that human beings again are beginning to see that our world, as it's been built, cannot be trusted. And that's in large part because of the corporate control over government. So government and corporations together are causing a control over our human condition and taking away our freedoms to be able to choose for ourselves what's best for us. So as this eclipse season happens and as the next 9 months roll in, we humans are going to continue to be woken up, and we humans are going to continue to be able to believe more and more that we can have an effect on our world, just like people believed back in the 60s and the 70s. And so the old paradigm that keeps control of things, almost like in your own life, if you have an ego that's controlling your soul and your higher self, whatever words you have for that invisible part of you that is connected to the universe and connected to your real authentic self, that's the part that wants to emerge for you. That's the part that wants to come out, that you will listen to, that you'll be a part of, that soul self of yours. You, more and more, whatever ego construction that you've put together is going to want to come down. Now, that ego construction is based on how society or the old paradigm or the old age has told you you're supposed to be. So you've built up the ego in order to tell yourself that you're a good person, or you're a nice person, or you're a capable person, or whatever it is that the world or your families have told you that you should be. With all of these new energies coming in, that ego construction wants to break apart and come down, so in its place, your soul will begin to have a stronger and stronger voice for your life. As that soul gets stronger and stronger, and the ego construction comes down, that means that also a lot of what you have felt comfortable and through its familiarity is not going to feel right to you anymore. It's not going to feel right to you to be in relationships that you have a certain role in that doesn't feel like it's you, or relationships that are abusive to you, or that you are abusive in. Those are not going to feel right to you anymore. To be in jobs where you're just playing a role and not really being who you are, those will start falling apart as your old ego construction falls apart. And your soul will start having a stronger and stronger voice in you and in your life. What happens then as things start falling apart from your old life? That's when a person has to make decisions based on how fast can I let this happen, because as I'm letting go of these old ways of being that aren't right for me, I'm also letting go of what feels familiar and secure to me. So how do I make this transition? Sometimes you have no choice. Sometimes the universe just kind of governs the speed totally, and you just have to let go at the right time and trust that the universe and your own soul self will take care of you in the way you need to be taken care of. But other times you actually can make choices during the process, and you can say, I can't quite let go of this old job completely, even though it's not right for me. And maybe I can't totally leave this relationship right away, or maybe I need to look at it a little further to see if it's not right for me. Maybe the other person will be growing with me. And so you have some choice through the process as to how fast or slow you feel you need to go to let go of your old self and your old life and embrace your new self and your new life. So during these eclipse seasons, these issues will sometimes come up as the energies intensify. Sometimes there's breakdowns of our old way of being and breakthroughs and awakenings into new ways of being. In the greater world, in the world of events, for an Aquarian age to be in its fullest, there needs to be equality. That's what Aquarius is about. And that means for civil rights, human rights, there needs to be equality amongst peoples. Just like in the 70s when African Americans, women, equality, gay, lesbian, equality. But that also means in the greater world. So superpowers don't really have much life in them in the Aquarian age. The Pisces age began with Rome, an empire, and the Christ. And the birth of Christ also turned into major organized religion, which we never had on this earth before. So now as we end the Pisces age, we have an empire still, and that is the United States. Some might also argue that China is another superpower and empire, but the United States empire kind of spreads across the globe much more than the Chinese empire does. So the empires have to go. The empire that the United States is a part of, is its engine is fueled by the economy, the global economy, and by a powerful military. So as the Aquarian age gets stronger, this empire will have to start being humbled. And part of the humility will be based on the economy not being as strong as it used to be, and on the military not dominating the world as it has been. Now, when the United States decided not to invade Syria and is starting to make friends, supposedly, with Iran, that's like a good step toward moving into an Aquarian age, I believe. But that's not over yet. There are all sorts of ingredients within the empire who are not going to be okay with that happening. It also makes me believe that President Obama could be in more danger because of some of the moves that he's been making. And the aspects this autumn and next spring to his natal chart are extremely difficult. So that could merely mean that, you know, he's going to face difficulties with the economy and things like that, or it could be something more serious than that, I'm not sure. But I do know that he's going to be feeling the weight of things and the seriousness of what's going on in the world and pressures to him to act a certain way over these next several months. Now, with that said, this whole idea of Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal, you know, that's all going out the window, because what's happened with that is that people have put on uniforms, so to speak, and they don't think for themselves anymore. And that goes for both being liberal and conservative. So a lot of your connection to having to be a this or a that is likely going to start breaking down also, if it hasn't already, so that you are able to think freely with your own mind and with your own heart, take in what you believe is true and right and good, and not have it based on what you've been programmed to believe or feel. So a lot of what transformation is on an individual level is a breaking down of the programming that we've had, so that we can truly interact with our world and other people from a more pure place of what's real, what's true, what's with love, and what's with what we really believe and we really see with our eyes. So you can't identify too strongly with anything, I don't believe, in order to really get through what's happening. I know that people are opening up more to other parties, libertarian, green, and some people are just giving it all up and thinking more anarchistically, like anarchists, thinking they just want the whole thing to just come down. And, you know, a lot of what people have been holding on to in old ways of being is also coming down too. A lot of that is based on like black or white thinking, either or thinking, as opposed to looking at things from a greater perspective and all the different many choices that maybe you have. In the old way of thinking, you know, there's male over here, there's female over there. They're like disconnected. They have their own agenda. They don't come together. There's the dark and the evil and the light and the good, and they don't come together. And in the new way of thinking, just like the yin-yang symbol, that's a circle with dark and light coming together. That's kind of the new way, so that it's not about enemies and it's not about us versus them. It's more about how do we make relationship with that which is different than us, both outside of ourselves and inside of ourselves. So that would mean that the judgments you have against certain parts of yourself would need to be let go of too, so that you can combine the different opposites that sit inside of you. In the greater world, I notice as things are breaking down, something similar from the 60s and 70s also, is there's like a sexual liberation that's going on. And I'm beginning to see more and more polyamorous groups, for instance. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm saying that that's something that's happening and it's real. And, you know, Aquarius is about the many, not the one. So I think that there's some kind of a movement that some people will act out with around that whole idea. It doesn't mean everyone's going to act out on it or everyone's going to think it's right, but it's a symbol of the old ways that were so crystallized breaking down, and people opening up to new possibilities and looking at things from the standpoint of, you know, I can't trust the old way that was being done, so I'm opening myself up to all new ways of looking at things. In the greater world, again, the economy, we can expect to be in trouble. There's a lot of old cycles that go back to 1929 when the stock market crashed that are similar today. So, for instance, Uranus was in Aries in 1929 at the stock market crash. It's in Aries today, the first time since, because Uranus has an 84-year cycle. It's now 84 years since the stock market crash, this month in October, actually. There's a solar eclipse in Scorpio in November. There was a solar eclipse in Scorpio in November of 1929. There were only 4 or 5 solar eclipses in Scorpio in between 29 and now. Neptune was making an aspect to the United States Venus then. Neptune is making an aspect to the United States Venus now. So there's a lot of indications that the United States or the worldwide and the United States stock market are going to be in greater trouble now. So we can anticipate that happening. As far as military goes and things like that, we can expect that there'll be more movement in the Middle East, more pushing toward conflict, and at the same time pushing toward peace. And I don't know which way that's going to go, which side that's moving, but ultimately it's going to move toward the peace for the Aquarian age. But sometimes we have breakthroughs like we've had recently, but we didn't go to war with Syria. But that doesn't mean that we won't rubber band backwards again. So don't get disgruntled or cynical if things move backwards a little bit, because that's sometimes the way it happens. 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. Even in your own personal life, you can expect that. So that's what we have to expect. We've got this eclipse period that's coming up now, and then we have another eclipse period that's coming up in the spring that's part of this Grand Cross. So you can expect in your personal life and in the greater world for things to be more intense, for things to shake up, for you to be put into a place where you have to decide, what do I have to let go and release? What do I need to embrace and bring in? And overall, this transformational period is going to be something that's very, very good and positive for all of us. But at times, it's not going to feel that way. So I will do another one of these YouTubes, most likely right after or in the middle if I find that it feels necessary of the eclipse period now. And I'll talk to you again soon. This is Leo Knighton Tallarico. Thank you.